Is meleeing full Vorago kills now a viable option with the Supreme Brawler aura, guys? Well, I'm going to answer that in this video, or at least attempt to answer it, and I'm only going to consider it from a DPS point of view and using a Noxious side, because Drygores would wreck you pretty bad if you did use them. With the side, obviously you have that 2 spaces that will prevent you from getting meleeed. I actually would have put this into my Supreme Brawler aura review video, which you can check out here, but unfortunately I only attempted melee Vorago after I released that video, so I had to put it into this video. Now, before I get into it, what is the problem with melee? The community at the moment seems to have a problem. Well, not really a problem, but people are generally not as conducive to using ranged or melee at Vorago as opposed to mage, because mage is the conventional way, the most consistent DPS and the safest option, but most people that I know at least are against using anything else. It's more a case of convention breaking the mold and sort of showing that other options can be as good if not better than mage, and this video hopefully will show you that. So yes, I gotta admit I only did kills during Scott week, and I did 3 kills in a 6-man and 2 kills in a 4-man. We failed 1 kill, that wasn't my fault, but the rest of the 5 kills went really smoothly with melee, and the kill we did fail was because someone decided to lure a red bomb into the DPS pile on P1. So yeah, that wasn't good, and then we didn't assign a Voc 5, so the base tank just got bled constantly and died. That wasn't good, but we did manage to save 2 people by walking it, by me walking it, and both of us lobbying, so that was good. I still haven't died using the side at Vorago. That's a really good bonus, isn't it? Based purely on statistics, P1 is the best phase to use melee on, for me anyway, because out of the 5 drops that I could have got, 5 P1 drops that I could have got, I got 4 of them, so that was pretty good. I actually got over 11k XP on P1 when we were 6-manning, which is pretty amazing considering that, you know, the XP should be really quite low because it is spread between 6 people DPSing. When you're 4-manning, obviously you'd expect XP to be high, but we were 6-manning, so yeah, and it didn't reset, so that was pretty good. The basic method is of course to Zerk as soon as possible and then pull out the Hurricane and the Assault. Obviously stay 1 square away throughout the whole kill to avoid melee hits, and Slaughter is actually really good ability to use here because it's going to be walking around a lot, and if you use Slaughter at the right time and it hits, of course it hitting is a big if, but if it hits it's going to be really good. And melee is actually also quite useful for your team. If you can southwork and the base tank can just DPS from where they're standing, it's nice and useful for your team. So P1 is a really good phase for the side to be used at, so I recommend the side for this phase. P2 of course is a real deal, it's where the most of the damage is done, and I gotta say I haven't nailed down the Zerk rotation for this phase, but I've tried to follow what I did when I was maging. So of course when it lands, what I did when I was maging was to, you know, use Metamorphosis. I'd use Zerk as soon as it dropped down, and then I just DPS'd it out until Reflect. I also actually had the extra responsibility of being Voc 5, which meant my DPS wasn't quite as high as it could have been, but when I was 6-manning I didn't have any rolls, so I could just DPS all out. But when you have that extra responsibility, it's actually quite nice, because when you Voc it, you're standing 1 square away, so it's obviously going to move towards you, and what you can do is use Slaughter just before you Voc it. That means it will triple the damage it does when you walk it, so that's pretty nice. It can annoy your team, so that's a disadvantage, but overall this phase is probably one of the better phases to use the side on if you use it properly. So Zerk before the first Reflect, and then just use Thresholds in the second Reflect. Third Reflect you can Zerk as well, but this time the difference is you can Adrenaline Pot of course, and the fourth, after the third Reflect you just use Natural Instinct, build up to Zerk and then DPS hard. After after you spam click it, you just use Thresholds, and that is phase done. It's actually really easy to get max XP here. Okay, I wouldn't say really easy, it does depend on RNG, but with this aura you can have pretty good accuracy, and if you pull out some really nice Hurricanes and Assaults, you can get really high XP here. And I actually, obviously I didn't try very hard, and I was able to get very close to max XP even when I was Voc 5ing. When I wasn't Voc 5ing I got max XP pretty easily, so this is actually quite easy to get max XP with. I know the Berserker aura and the Maniacal and the the Reckless Aura are also really good for this, but they only last 30 minutes as opposed to 1 hour for the Brawler Aura. So I recommend the Scythe for this phase as well because it's so good. P3 is actually when it starts getting a bit iffy, I'd say, because it depends of course on the rotation first of all, because there are 6 different rotations from P3 onwards. Now I obviously did it on Scott Week, and it is pretty bad on Scott Week because you get absolutely wrecked, because when you're meleeing of course the Scott will aggro on you and melee you, and if they both melee you while you're zerked and you're DPSing, you can probably get 1 hit or 2 hit or something like that. So you got to be very careful. Zerking isn't really a good option, and yeah, for Scott Week it's not great, but you know, if your team kills the 2 Scops really quickly, well, I guess that's not really a problem. I did almost die, as you can see in one of my 4-man kills. If I died that would have been a first, but still my 100% well non-failure success rate is still intact. 100% not dying rate, 100% survival rate is still intact, thanks to some RNG luck which prevented me from getting KO'd. But yeah, for Scott Week it's not great. But if you ever look at some of the other rotations, for example the Green Bomb rotation, it's going to be really good on Green Bomb because melee DPS on Green Bomb P3 is so good, because melee obviously if you land your hits it can be the best deeps possible, and of course it's not great for Vitalis week, which is the current week, because you're going to be MD of Vorago while your teammates are in the northeast corner of the room trying to group together so that they could spawn the Vitalis close to them. So yeah, it's not going to be great for Vitalis, and it's not the best for a few other rotations, but definitely for Green Bomb it's great. For Team Split it's not great either, but for Green Bomb it is good. And meleeing in P4 is pretty similar to P3, with the only difference being the fact that when you're in the waterfall you can't do as much damage. Well, you can't do any damage. When you're coming out of the waterfall you have a slight disadvantage, because you know the mages and rangers can get their snapshots and wild magics in, but you have to wait till you get to melee distance before you can do that. So you do have a bit of a disadvantage, I'd say, when you're using this method in P4, but your DPS again can be pretty high if you get your rotations in correctly. The same things apply, so it's bad for you know, Purple Bomb in P4 for example, because you won't do as much damage, just because the closer you are to the center of Vorago the less damage you do in Purple Bomb, and all the things that applied in P3 also apply here. For the other rotations, for Green Bomb it's good again, as I said, because you do have a lot of time in which the DPS between reflex and waterfalls. Now P5 is one of the most controversial phases. In fact, it is the most controversial phase when you're using melee. Dragos are out the question, because with Dragos you'll be melee distance and you'll get meleeed, and Vorago will constantly push you back and make the phase longer. But with Noctis Side on the other hand, it's actually an advantage. Well, it's not an advantage, but it's actually better, because of course you can stay 2 squares away without getting meleeed. You just got to be constantly aware of the fact that sometimes you may go melee distance when he moves back towards you, and you need to click away manually. You need to be aware of that and click away quickly in order to prevent melee hits and push your team backwards. But the DPS itself is really good. The only problem is assault. When you zerk and you assault, it's likely he's going to move back and he's going to cancel your assault, so assault sort of gets cut short because of the fact that he moves back. But you can also use Slaughter, which makes up for it, because Slaughter of course does triple damage if he moves, and he does move a lot, so triple damage is awesome with Slaughter. You gotta hope it hits of course, but two-handed abilities are better here than dual-wield abilities, for the simple fact that Destroy, if you could use it, if you did bring Dragos, would be cancelled again, the same way that Assault would be cancelled, because Destroy would be cancelled when he moves back and you'll have to move. Your character will automatically move and it will cancel Destroy, so that's a big issue as well. But as I said, I think Slaughter makes up for it. You just gotta remember to stay 1 square away, otherwise you could mess up your team. Purple Bomb was actually a reasonably easy rotation to do this in, but Team Split for example is going to be quite difficult, because you're going to have to move back and then run back, and then you won't have too much of a window in which to zerk. But the last thing I'd say is that there is a big advantage to using melee if your team uses Storm Shards. Now remember, when you shatter using Storm Shatter, the damage can be boosted by either whatever ultimate you're using. So if you're using Death Swiftness, it'll be boosted by 50%. If you're using Meta, it'll be boosted by 66% when you use Shatter. And if you're using Zerk, it'll be boosted by 100%. So if someone with Zerk shatters, it could mean massive DPS. This could potentially be really good. It could be make or break at hard mode Vorago for example. But even normal mode, Zerk can be amazing if you use Shatter. So there are ups and downs for all of them, and overall there are of course a few advantages and disadvantages to using melee, not just in P5 but throughout the whole kill. Let's get the bad news out of the way, guys. So the disadvantages are the potential damage you can take, because no matter how hard you try, you will MD quite a bit by accident or on purpose or whatever. You will MD, and that means you will get hit by the melee attacks from Vorago. Even though you're using a Scythe sometimes, as I said, you can't help it. And also during Scop week you will get hit quite a bit by the Scopulus, because Scopulus will always attack you if you're meleeing it, and that means you're going to get absolutely wrecked. And that also follows on to the fact that you will be unable to DPS as well in certain situations, or you might get in the way of things. For example, in Scop week you can't really circle. Well, you can, but you will get absolutely wrecked, so your DPS won't be up to scratch probably. But of course if your team is good, you can just devotion it and do it quickly. By the time the devotion runs out, your team might be able to kill it. If your team is good, I don't know if it is or not. But Scop peak generally is pretty bad. And when Vorago is moving, there's a big problem because assault and stuff gets cancelled. For example, in P5, when it keeps moving back and forth, your assault gets cancelled. And also destroy if by any chance you're using Dragos, which I don't recommend you do. And when the base tank is walking it in P3 and P4, of course you can't do as much damage because you have to keep moving alongside the base tank when he's walking it, or she of course. And there are also a few instances where you need to run, and because you need to run you won't be able to DPS until you get MD because you're using melee. So when you're doing team split you have to run back to MD after you come out of the box, and when you're doing waterfalls you have to run back to MD. That puts you at slight disadvantage, I suppose. And also ceilings week you have to run to MD, so that is a slight disadvantage, but it's not a major thing I'd say. Vitalis as well, Vitalis week when you need to be northeast, you can't really stand northeast because you have to be next to Vorago to be able to melee him. Duh. And melee is also a disadvantage to use when it's purple bomb week, because you'll be standing too close to the center and you won't be doing as much deeps as someone who isn't standing close to the center. And some other disadvantages, of course, you have to concentrate more to make sure you don't screw up or fail the kill or whatever. In P5, when you're meleeing in P5, you have to constantly move out of MD, or else you risk getting melee hits and pushing a team backwards. So those are the disadvantages in my opinion. And coming on to the advantages, well, the main advantage is that you can have great DPS if your hits land and you know what you're doing, especially in P2 where you can get max XP without too much effort, and even P1 where from my personal experience you can get quite high XP drops. Alright, I got 4 out of the 5 P1 drops, so you know, I got quite high XP drops. Maybe it was just RNG, I don't know. P3 can be extremely fast on green bomb week because it's all about DPS on green bomb week to make sure you don't screw up. And with the box method 2 of your team can use melee and 2 of 2 have to use something else. P5 with slaughter, it's amazing, and when you shatter using Zerk it's also really good. So it can make or break small team P5s in my opinion. And southworking is also pretty good in P1 because you can southwork without affecting your DPS because you're melee distance anyway, so you might as well help out your team. And Vogue 5 can be quite good because you can use a slaughter ability but just before you Vogue 5, because when you Vogue 5 it'll have to move 1 square to get to melee distance of you, and when you use slaughter of course when he moves it will do triple damage. So those are some of the advantages, but the most important advantage is that it's a lot of fun. That's what we play the game for. It's for having fun. If you don't play the game for that, I don't know why you're playing the game. If you want to change, definitely melee. I think it's a great idea. So far at least, please let me know if you've had any more problems. I haven't tried it out on any week except Scott week, so I am a bit biased, but overall I would recommend it. Give it a go with the Supreme Brawler aura, see if you like it. As long as you don't get in the way of your team, I think it's a great idea, and I think you're going to have a lot of fun. You and your team are going to have a lot of fun, as long as you don't mess up, of course. But yeah, thanks for watching guys, and I will see you guys next time.